Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Councillor Makule Guinness. I'm the chair of the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Panel, and I welcome you to this meeting. Please note that this meeting might be filmed or recorded by the Council for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site or by anyone at site. Like anyone attending the meeting using any communication methods, although we ask members of the public recording, filming and reporting on the meeting not to include the public sitting areas, members of the public attending the meeting should be aware that we cannot guarantee that basically they will be filmed and recorded and while attending the meeting. So by entering the meeting room and using the public sitting area, you are consenting to film and to possibly use those features and sound recording. Okay, I will begin by asking panel and co-opted members to introduce themselves. I will start with the members that are present here on my left, right.
I'm Sue Jameson, Councillor for Bruce Castle.
Yeah, we'll go that way. Sure.
I'm Rob Manick. I'm the Scrutiny Support Officer.
Councillor Brothers.
I'm Zena Brebzel, I'm Cabinet Member for Children, Schools and Friends.
I'm Lottie Collett and I'm Councillor for Woodside.
Okay. We also have two councillor colleagues and corporate members joining us virtually. Councillor Mason, would you like to introduce yourself? I'll start with councillors first.
Hi, yeah, my name's Councillor Mary Mason and I am from Bounds Green ward.
Thank you. Anna?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna Abel and I'm a councillor for Haringey ward.
Yvonne?
Hello, I'm Yvonne Denny and I'm from the Church of England Diocese representative.
Thanks. We have Anita with us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anita Jaku and I'm a parent governor representative.
Thank you for that, everyone. Do we have any apologies for absence, Rob?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Buxton, and from Priya Junjun Walla and Lords Kiva, who are statutory co-optees on the panel.
Thank you for that. Any declaration, item 4, declaration of interest. This is basically any members who have a declaration of interest in regards to any of the items that we're discussing. We are encouraging you to mention that. No? Okay. Item 5, deputation, petition, presentation and questions.
None received.
None received. Okay. Item 6 is the minutes of the last meeting, pages between 1 to 8. Obviously, I know that none of you were, this is the first meeting of the new administration, so none of you were present in that meeting. And basically, as far as I've read the minutes, and I could say that they were accurate record of what was discussed then. Are we approving the minutes? Any issues, or does any of the co-optees would like to raise any issues with the minutes of the last meeting? Are we happy to approve?
Happy to approve, Chair.
Great. Thank you for that, Anita. Okay, item 7, terms of reference and membership. We have a report as part of, we have a statement in our agenda pack, and the item, it's basically for this committee, the first meeting of the Children and Young People's Committee, to approve, to note the terms of reference for the membership of the panel. And I would like to open this to basically members and the co-optees. If there's any questions any of you would like to ask in regards to the terms of reference for this committee. Mary, I can see your hands. Yeah.
Thanks, McBurley. I understand, because we've received communication from some of the co-optee members, that there was a pre-meeting to the scrutiny panel meeting, where their 4 co-opted members walked out of that meeting because they were disconcerted about the way that they'd been treated. And I know that that's possibly under investigation, but I'd just like to have an update about whether that is being dealt with and how it's being dealt with, please.
Thank you. Rob, can I bring you to respond?
It wasn't a meeting of the panel, it was a meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It was a pre-meeting for that, and at the moment action is being taken to try and resolve the issues that were raised. That's all I'm able to really say at the time. I mean, I wasn't at the meeting, so I can't really comment on what occurred there.
Yeah. Mary, do you want to?
Sorry, just to come back. Yeah, my concern is twofold. One is I understand it was a pre-meeting and therefore it wasn't minuted, so that's fine. But these are 4 community co-optees, all of whom have spent a lot of their time and energy bringing community interest to the Children and Young People's panel. And so I think it is of great concern to members that the 4 of them were not happy with the way that they had been treated at that meeting. I'm no judge of that because I wasn't present, but I do think that we need to be very, very careful about how we make sure that all our co-optees feel included, and also that we want to hear the voice of them. I understand there was a suggestion that their voice should be limited, and I think that goes against the spirit of co-production that the council is committed to. So I just think that once we know what the result of any complaint is, then I think it would be good for us to be able to have some kind of discussion with the co-optees so that we are all aware of how they can input into committee meetings. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll definitely make note of that, Mary. I just wanted to, before I bring Anita in, I want to come back and just say that, reiterate what Rob said. This meeting was not one of the meeting of Children's and Young People's panel. It was the Overview and Scrutiny meeting. And it was in relation to the remit of the co-optee's role within the Overview and Scrutiny, because the same community of co-optees sit in both meetings, Children and Young People Committee, as well as the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So in regards to Children's and Young People's Committee, there is no restriction or limitation that their role should be only advisory in relation to education, because what this committee deals with, it's relevant to co-optees who are basically coming from educational background. That all aspect of it could be, basically there's no limitation or restriction how they contribute or where they contribute in this committee. It was in relation to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which will be dealt with and addressed. So I just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't one of the Children and Young People's meeting where this disagreement or different views about the role discussion happened. Anita, can I bring you in now?
Thank you, Makbula, and thank you, Mary. I guess I just want to sort of offer a little bit of information and clarification. So no, it wasn't this committee, it was the Overview Scrutiny Committee 2 weeks ago. Concerns and complaint has been referred to the Standards Committee now, so it's in that process as we speak. We haven't had any communication in any way, shape or form, or I certainly haven't. Yvonne might have a different experience to myself. And I really welcome a level of clarity in terms of ensuring that our roles are seen to be part of a sort of inclusive, open, honest, transparent process and mechanism which we're all trying to achieve, including co-optees. So I want to be very clear about that as well, and also just to be clear that we haven't had any communications whatsoever at the present moment. So it's all a little bit, well, I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what's happening, but we have forwarded our comments. And I just want to thank you, Chair, just to clarify, our contributions are valued and welcome. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions before we kind of like note the terms of references for this panel? Yeah, I'll be happy to note that. Yeah. Okay, I will move to item 8. Item 8 is the appointment of non-voting corporate members, and for that, Rob will present us a report. And once we hear the report, and this is in regards to the suggestion of this committee in its previous work to actually appoint a parent carer from SEND community permanently to this committee. So I will ask Rob to.
Actually, this is probably quite an
present.
opportune time to be presenting this report, because it's probably as well that I give the background to the whole question of co-opted members. We're introducing this because there's two categories of co-opted member. They are the statutory ones, which are the ones we've just been talking about, where there are two parent governor representatives, and there are two church representatives. We are legally required to have these on any scrutiny body that covers education issues, and they are able to vote on any education issue. The church representatives are appointed by the diocesan authorities. We don't have any role in their appointment. It's entirely up to the diocese to decide. Parent governor reps are normally elected for a period of 2 years, and the elections are conducted by Haringey Education Partnership at the moment. So they are voting co-optees. Well, in addition to that, scrutiny bodies can also appoint non-voting co-opted members. And this is what this report concerns. During the last year of the panel, SEND was a very big issue, and it was agreed that somebody to represent special educational needs would be appointed to sit as a non-voting member of the panel. And to this end, I've approached Haringey Parent Carers Forum, them to nominate someone to sit on the panel. When in practice, we very rarely have votes on scrutiny bodies. We try to work by consensus. So actually, the issue of voting is probably something that we're red herring. But anyway, at the moment, we're waiting for a response from Haringey Parent Carers Forum. But the idea is we leave it up to determine who they appoint. So the appointment will be to the organisation to nominate someone rather than a specific individual.
Yes.
I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rob. Are there any questions? Anita, I can see your hands. I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand or it's a new.
Chair, my hand's a legacy hand, so I'm going to lower that. But Yvonne did have her hand up, so.
Sorry, I couldn't see that. Apologies,
yes.
Yvonne. I didn't. Okay, would you like to come in, Yvonne?
It is very upsetting what we've been through this last month between us. And I just want to say that my position on this panel has been quite a long one, and I have enjoyed it. Report back to the diocese regularly, and I've never had any complaints from them whatsoever, hence I'm still here. Children do mean a great deal to me. I raised a disabled child in this borough and I proved them wrong. He did amount to something. And I think this particular group which has Zena Bravazon on it, which is absolutely fantastic because she knows more than most councillors about what is good and what is not good. I just want to say, I do hope we're going to have some feedback on the green and white papers, if at all possible, because I have a very strong interest in this because 3 of my great-grandchildren are disabled as well, and they are part of SEND. So I need to make sure that although we're only supposed to be on here for the children and young people, we've never had an issue before, and it is very upsetting to feel that you're not worthy of being able to participate as everybody else. So I hope we can bring that to an end, and hopefully this year on this panel will be, you know, much better for us and for the SEND children, because there's hundreds and hundreds of them now. I thought it was bad in 1976, but Jesus, it's got out of hand, this autism and everything. And let's hope they're going to be able to resolve some of it. Thanks ever so much anyway. And I'm sorry for being late, but my buggy broke down on the way up here. So I had to get a cab to bring me home so that I could join you. I'm sorry I missed the pre-meeting anyway.
Thank you for that, Yvonne. That's fine. You haven't missed much. So it's good to have you here. And thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
We are happy to approve that. Basically, just to say that we are happy with that proposal, that we think it will, having a representative that represent the interest and issues that the children of SEND experience would be a good contribution, would be a good thing to do. So therefore, we are happy to support the committee's recommendation. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Item 9, and item 9 is obviously we have this opportunity to Councillor Bravazon is here with us, and she will be briefly outlining the development in her profile portfolio and what she's been doing since becoming the cabinet lead again. Yeah, then we will have obviously time to ask some questions, and I note that there are a number of questions already waiting for Councillor Bravazon, but we will give her an opportunity to give us an update. Then we can take questions. Zina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I haven't really had much notification about what you wanted, so I'm probably going to have to speak a bit off the top of my head because I didn't get any. I hate to mention it again. Didn't get any. No, I've got to do cabinet member questions. But in terms of an overview, I think I produced an overview certainly for Labour members. I don't know. Obviously not in the Labour group. So for everybody, I'll just recap all of that. You will know that there is statutory guidance which sets out the framework for the role of both the DCS and the Cabinet Member for Children's Services. That was approved in 2004. It hasn't changed yet, despite the landscape of education in particular changing completely since 2004. But the key points in the statutory guidance, and Anne will check it or correct me if I miss anything out, are that we're obviously completely accountable for children's social care and what happens with children's social care. And that includes child protection, looks after children, corporate parenting, and all the aspects of the role that the local authority has in looking after children who are in need. Really, we're sort of governed by the Children Act, which is a magnificent piece of legislation, Children Act 1989. And so the whole of the social care provision we are accountable for. And effectively, we always stop with the director, cabinet member, chief executive, and leader of the council, right? Because of the statutory guidance. In terms of education, we are accountable for the quality of education in our schools and for the provision of education. But of course, that is now, Yvonne raised the question, raised the white paper, which is now a bill, Parliament, and also the green paper on special needs. The whole of the landscape of education has changed following the introduction of academies and preschools. So whilst that began when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, Greg City was a Labour academy. It accelerated in 2011 when Michael Gove became Minister and put in place legislation for what they call forced academies. We haven't seen any forced academies here since Downhouse and Mill Park, Trinity, and what was then Nightingale now Trinity, and Ray. Four of us had four. But that the landscape, that particular political decision around academisation has resulted in the most massive fragmentation of education and a two-tier system. So, for example, the government will not fund school repairs of maintained community schools. We have to do it. So, in our budget, in the capital budget, we have something approaching over 90 million now over 5 years of the 5-year budget span. We do the budgets in 5-year planning. We have something like 90 million in the capital budget to invest in community schools. So we will not invest in academies because we don't know. Then they are nothing to do with local authority. They set their own admission. They set their own numbers. They can run their curriculum. So the relationships are very. It's not that they're always difficult. They say they want to work in a family of schools, but ultimately we don't have responsibility for roof forms in the academy. It really isn't the council's responsibility. That would have to be the Department for Education through the Regional Schools Commission. So you've got a parallel system. Now all of this has been going along for, as I said, since 2011. But the schools bill now seeks to have a fully academised system by 2030. So that is the background, as Yvonne raised it, that we have to think about. So for me, I've spoken, Anne and I have spoken for hours about these issues. And for me, let me make it crystal clear, children's social care always is number one. You can't not have it number one. Our responsibilities for child protection and for children's social care looks after children. So if I could just say that's a given. Yeah, it's just a given. But the other big priority is keeping our eyes firmly on what is happening in Parliament. There hasn't been any legislation around schools for years. The government have decided now that they have a direction of travel. And so we're watching the legislation. It's already deeply mired in the House of Lords. And on the very day that we had our meeting, our meeting with schools to begin the dialogue of what's happening in the legislative landscape, how does it impact on Haringey? What are we going to do about all of this? How are we going to work with our schools? Because we obviously don't want our schools to academise. That's plan A. We don't want that. We have regard to what's going on, obviously, in legislation. Think about it. On the very day that happened, the minister then tore up half the bill. That was it. I don't know if you saw it in the Guardian or in the press, but there's been a sort of revolt amongst the Tories in the House of Lords because the legislation, forgive me for laughing, but you have to understand the academies, it was all supposed to be about freedoms. We were going to be free, they can do what they like. We have a free market. You have 30 in your class, you have 35. You don't have to have this, you don't have to have that. It breaks up the rules that govern community schools. So they have all these freedoms, but the bill in its first draft reduced their freedom so that the minister could decide what you would do at 9 o'clock in the morning and should wear a uniform or not wear a uniform, what you would. So actually centralising in a very rigid, I was going to say, authoritarian way. So all the academy chains have revolted against this. So we now, the last we heard, which was on Friday at the schools conference, is that they're going back to the drawing board. So we will see what happens with that. Meanwhile, under Anne's leadership, and with, as I would say, with my full support, I'm a lead member, but Anne's day-to-day leadership, we are going to be setting up a working group with the schools, which was very well received, to start looking at how we all work together. And we already do, but actually to improve and build on that, because everything about this is about relationships, really. Because schools are effectively what you might loosely call offshore. They are autonomous and self-governing, but of course, no school is an island. We provide huge number of services, some of which people recognise, some of which they don't. You know, you sometimes take these for granted, it's just there. Like I said, 90 million quid for school buildings. If it became an academy, you'd have to rely on the Education Skills Funding Agency, the largesse of the DFE, to remember to fix your roof. So there are real big issues we need to talk about in our schools. Which brings me on to special needs, because of course special needs operates in the environment of all of that. And so the Green Paper is out for consultation, which ends on the 22nd of July, I believe. So it's got a very, very, very long way to go before it even turns into a white paper. It's years, it's going to take years. But there are some very worrying things in it. And we heard from this care forums some of their concerns. So I'll put that on my list of priorities. SEND always, because we have to, I am very pleased to say, I think things have really, really picked up in special needs. I think we've seen a massive change since the inspection, but it was going on before the inspection. And I think the officers really knew what the weaknesses were and what strengths were. So anybody here knows what self-evaluation is. A SEF in the school, local authority does the same thing. They had to do a self-evaluation and came out pretty much where they thought it would. And contrary, I want to say on record, contrary.
Sorry, Zina, I was going to mention that actually your time was 5 minutes. You are sort of.
You didn't mention
that.
I
didn't. So that's why I'm kind of allowing you to finish your last.
I'll finish my sentence.
Then
right.
we will.
Contrary to some of the things that was on Twitter and all the sometimes what I might loosely call half information, a bit of knowledge. Actually, any close reading of that inspection would say yes, this was all being dealt with through the written statement of action. But unlike some of the promises, we didn't have 10 areas of improvement. We have 3. And I would have, as a seasoned reader of Ofsted reports, I would put that firmly in the green shoots of recovery type of report, as opposed to, if you're full of Ofsted language, you get a feel. And I think our officers are really moving SEN along, and no doubt there'll be some questions on that. Youth, you said to be opening, so I'm sure we'll be asked about that. Youth justice, that is a big area. Obviously, we have got some very big worries in the light recent events, antisocial behaviour. We've got summer coming. We have to make sure our programme is, well, it's a great programme. It's on the website now. It's going out. There's inclusive provision for children with special needs under 5s. We've really extended up to our game. I'll leave it there.
Yes, thank you for that, Zina. Yeah, we've got, obviously we've got this opportunity to ask Councillor Brotherson questions. I already noted that Mary asked a question. You wanted to ask a question, Mary, the question you raised in pre-meeting, and you felt that was appropriate for Councillor Brotherson and Anne's team to answer. And also anyone else having question, please indicate. Yeah, Mary.
Thank you very much, Makbuli, and Councillor Brabazon. Thank you very much for the report you just gave. I think that we're all very, very keen and interested in making sure that SEND provision is as good as it possibly can be. The question, however, that I had was about the Domestic Abuse Act, and I know that I haven't raised this with you, so it might be that you want to send a report back through another means. But as you know, in the Domestic Abuse Act in 2020, children and young people were included as victims of domestic abuse, and there were therefore a requirement on local authorities and on the level 1 tier, the i.e. MOPAC and the and GLA, to make provisions. I know that MOPAC and GLA have put some funds into this, and I just wanted to know from yourself, either now or at a future date when you've had a chance to look at it, what preparations have happened in Haringey to ensure that services are available to children and young people who are victims of domestic abuse? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really good question. I probably would have to come back to you. I don't want to say
Sure.
things which I've not got detailed knowledge at this moment. So I could defer to Anne now or come back to you with a proper reply, which I think would be the most sensible thing.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's fine. Thank you.
Chair, I'm just checking to see whether Bev Hendricks is online. She was
Yes,
earlier, and I think
Bev
she
was
is.
earlier, yeah.
So if I could, hi Bev, we may need to come back with a fuller report, because it's always helpful if we know what the answer is beforehand, so we can give our full and our best report rather than just something that's on the top of our head.
Yeah.
So we work very closely with the violence against women and girls. Have I got it wrong? VAUG, violence against lovely.
Yeah.
Across the piece. So we work with children and we work with adults, and Beverly Tucker and myself, we chair that board. And so through that, there are resources that we have commissioned that take place in schools, and we monitor through there. But at that point, Bev, I'll stop and hand over to you. You may want to add to what I've said, or we might agree to bring a report back. Shall I leave that with you?
Thanks so much, Anne. Hello, Councillor Mason. We will come back with a fuller report. I think that's going to be much more constructive. That there's a lot of detail, both strategically and operational, that's gone into responding to that requirement. I think that when you receive the report, it will enable us to have a more robust conversation about it.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Bev. Thank you.
Anne, you wanted to say something?
Just to add, Councillor Mason, that this isn't, I often use the phrase a light switch. You're right that the Act, and I'm really pleased that it recognised the impact of children and young people, domestic violence abuse, but that in itself does not change the landscape or change the relationships that young people have between themselves. And that is something that we need to do, working through schools, through restorative justice behaviour, so that the relationships with young people are right all the way through into adulthood. So there's much that we would like to come back and speak about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Bev and Anne. I was going to suggest that obviously when that report is ready, we will either bring it to this committee for a discussion, or if there is a quicker, shorter kind of response to the question, then we could obviously circulate it to members. But it seems like having a proper report would be a better option, and we will do that. Thank you for that, Bev. Anita, I can see your hands up, and anyone else? No, Yvonne's hand is, okay. Yeah. We can't hear you, Anita. You're mute.
If Yvonne was before me.
For some reason, I cannot see hand icon on Yvonne's camera.
Okay. Yvonne, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Yvonne, now I can see you. Yes. Sorry if I didn't. I'm not trying to ignore you, Yvonne.
No, I can't understand. I just want to say thank you to Zena, because obviously they are working very well together, but we need to keep SEND on the agenda as much as possible, because there are an awful lot of children out there that still need that help put into either schools or into the special areas of where they are. We had a meeting, you know, just last week, and it was the topic of conversation, because, you know, you could get 200 or 300 children together, but unfortunately, I find the special school that's been built into the old Belmont school, how on earth do those children get to be part of the local area, the local parks and the open spaces that are there for children? Also, I was surprised when I went to Markfield. They've got a new project starting, and it's the same sort of thing that was out in the 1970s and 80s. Could somebody explain why that's happening and it's not been really updated as it should be?
I don't think.
Thank you for that, Yvonne. I will bring Councillor Brabazon to respond.
Well, I can't really account for the Markfield project's internal programming. I don't know which project you're talking about, Yvonne, but my understanding is that Markfield, you know, they're doing, obviously they run the SENDIAS for us, which is the independent advice for families. And I have not heard any criticism of Markfield and the services they provide. So I don't know what project that is. If you want to let me know, but
I will.
I'm not really very clear on what it is.
Yeah.
I would hope that, but sometimes some of the old tunes are the best tunes, you know. I don't know what project it is. And they are an independent organisation, albeit that they are, you know, we support them and fund them. So I think that's for their management committee.
Yeah, I'll let you know, Zena, because when we had it, the presentation of it at the SEND meeting, it just doesn't bear true to what it is. It's just something that was out years and years ago. So I wanted to know what new changes have been put into it and what changes haven't. Okay, so I'll let you know.
I think that'll have to come via you and Markfield.
Yvonne, I just wanted to quickly come on that. Was that a consultation that council was proposing, and you felt like the methods or some of the suggestions were kind of out of date, or was it like was it a council proposed project you're talking about?
I believe so, yes. Until I go back to my notes, I don't know, but I will let you know, and I will also let Zena know, because, you know, I want to make sure that anything that actually comes forward now is actually for the benefit of the children and not just Markfield. It's the children that we have to be concerned with, not the people who are teaching it. We need to make sure that they have everything that they should in a consultation. So I'll let you know. I'll get the papers out and I'll send them over to Zena.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
That's all right.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just raise the issue of intersectionality and my worry of children who may fall through the gaps because the intersectional aspects of their lives experience is somehow not either missed or someone somewhere isn't joining the dots. And I want to not just sort of mention EHCP, but I'm talking about children who are pre-diagnosis, children who are waiting on this ever increasing list of being diagnosed. I personally know of teachers and other schools who are desperate to get something in place, particularly where a child has high needs that haven't officially been diagnosed. And of course, there isn't necessarily any funding attached, and we're desperately scraping funding from here, scraping resources from there, you know, stealing staff from that. Literally, I saw it this morning, stealing staff from one classroom to spend 15 minutes with a child in order to give the teacher a break. And when I asked, have these children got any plans? I was told no, too young, on the waiting list, just pre-diagnosis. I noticed also some of the children were new to Haringey, new to the UK. Some, but not all, staff certainly said that they have had noticeable issues from reception or nursery, but it's not until year 1, 2 or 3 that we can get them diagnosed. So I just wondered what and how that would be considered. I absolutely know it's a challenge. I absolutely know you don't have a magic wand, Zena or Anne. I absolutely appreciate that. But of course, this is the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Anita. Yeah.
Well, I think the general position is that you want every child to be diagnosed and identified as soon as you possibly can. In the early years, they do sometimes wait because they want to see something. That doesn't mean that services aren't being provided or the children aren't being supported. But there is, I think, a school of thought that you don't diagnose too soon. Well, I mean, I think that you could argue either way on that. But that doesn't mean, for example, if a child is in nursery, that the staff haven't already got a plan and they aren't doing some of the work, and if a child has multiple issues, you know. But I do get the point. I get the point, and obviously there are some children who have very high needs, and diagnosis can be very complicated. So we were hearing today, for example, happily some of the autism diagnosis timescales are coming down, albeit not as fast as we'd like, but they are reducing, which is because of some increased investment as a result of the written statement of action and so on, but still too long. But sometimes children's needs are very, very complex, which is what you're sort of indicating. And so it can take longer. But the issue is, while they're waiting, they need to be supported. That's really what you're saying. And sometimes the resources may not be there. And even if they have a statement, it's a perverse incentive because the school has to put in the first 6,000. Now, there are people in this meeting far more knowledgeable than me about all those procedural things and how you do it and how you weigh it up. But you're asking me for my view as cabinet member. And my view would be, first of all, that we do need to identify children as quickly as possible. We need to make sure that we do as much work as we possibly can in the early years. We're putting in more money for speech and language identification, and there's going to be a real big push on outreach to identify children in the early years. I think if we do that, then we not only do the best by the children, we do the best actually by their families and by their country and the economy, and in the big macro world, we do the best for everybody. In the schools, when kids are identified, as I said, it sometimes takes longer. The parents have their views. I think it's absolutely critical that parents' voice is not just heard, but is actually around that table, because the people who know their children best are parents. That's my experience. Parents know everything. They may not know everything about special needs, but they know about their child. But there's also a view, there's also a role for the professionals who sometimes have to say to a family, we've got something very difficult that we need to tell you. We've got professional experience, and that way of managing that to get to a good outcome is, I suppose, one of the really big arts, or the big things in special needs about that collaboration. And you have to work in the collaboration to get there. And where it's very, very complex needs, which is what you're talking about, I think it's really can take a long time. I am talking a bit from personal experience, and as someone who worked in special needs, and I realised I didn't really understand it until it happened in my own family. So but I can see professionals can see things that families sometimes don't want or can't deal with to begin with. You've got to get people there. That's also another important part of it. So I'm going to hand over to Anne. I'm not sure if I've answered your question. I've tried.
Yeah, thank you for that, Zena.
Thank you. And I'll call on Jackie really to give some information. Jackie, I can see you online. I'm not sure if you're actually, yes, Jackie's there. So will I take from the question, rather than answering the question for the individual, I think it is about how the system as a whole works. And we know that there isn't sufficient money or resource in the system. And we know that the system is stretched. But what we do need, what we are doing is working better with the system to be sure that, as Councillor Brabazon has said, that wait times come down in all areas. But that, again, I think have I already used the phrase light switch today? That takes, we can't fix it tomorrow is what I mean by that. We've put a lot of, what's the best word to use? We've worked very closely with our colleagues in health to be sure we get additional speech and language resource, for example. We've worked very closely with our colleagues in health to be sure we bring down the autism wait times and so on. And I think, I don't know the age of this child, and I don't know when you say they're newly arrived, whether it's from another local authority or if it's from outside of the country, or it's, for example, from Ukraine. But one of the things we really do need to do is spend time understanding and seeing and getting, how does this child, what are the strengths of the child and what are the needs and areas for improvement alongside the family, and then getting the best package together for the child. But what I say, and Councillor Brabazon also says, and we as a system, we know we need speech and language therapy at the earliest before it becomes chronic down the line. So we're getting our strategies aligned, working with health, to be sure that's where we get to, so that there's a universal approach. It's not every child that needs speech and language therapy, but does need speech and language approaches. If there's a little bit of a need at a very early age, 2, 3, that we can help the families with, and it might be, and I caricature only for effect, you know, speaking to the child, reading to the child, engaging with the child to help the child along. And then, we need to be able to make sure that if the child actually has a need for a speech and language therapist, that we get there quickly rather than not providing any support and that taking a long time to shift the system for that individual child. So it's a whole system approach, and I'll stop at that point and hand over to Jackie, who has more detail.
Jackie.
Thank you, Anne. I think members, just to give you reassurance, I think pretty much at every scrutiny meeting since I started, there has been an agenda item on SEND. So the panel have done really well to seek that assurance and hold the service to account. But I would agree with Anne about that we're moving towards a systemic approach and making sure it's about the whole system that's held accountable. So within the local authority SEND service itself, you know, there's been a number of programs of work. So we have a brand new SEND strategy that we widely consulted on. We have a written statement of action, which is set for the next 2 years. We have a significant service improvement transformation journey in terms of improving practice. We've also had significant financial investment over the last year of up to £750,000. We are subject to very intense scrutiny, so not only from yourselves, rightly so, but from the Department for Education, from Ofsted, from our SEND Executive Board. And we are exploring the possibility, the likelihood that we'll be entering the safety valve programme, which is around how we as a council are managing and reducing our overspend within the high needs block for children with SEND without compromising outcomes for children. So there's a whole range of work that's going on within the local authority SEND service and with its partners. And what I would say is our focus has very much been on early intervention, so graduated response, as Anne's talked about. So we've developed a whole programme of work with schools in terms of their being clear on their roles, their responsibilities, and how we as a local authority can support them to support children with SEND. There's a whole programme of work around demand management, making sure the right children receive the right support. And then there's a whole programme of work around culture, governance and leadership in terms of reviewing all of our processes, but how are we moving forward together as a partnership? So as an example, at the SEND Executive, that really is a board that is driving forward change across the system and making sure that other partners are held equally to account. So thinking about the North Central London Integrated Care Board and autism wait times, you know, that is a report that regularly comes to the board where there's positive scrutiny and challenge around how are colleagues driving those waiting times down, because we know that's a significant pressure and a problem for families. So we had some feedback. It's timely to share this today from the Department for Education. We had our SEND Executive Board this morning. They gave us a debrief afterwards as part of our improvement journey. And what they said was that today they could see they've observed about 3 or 4 meetings now that we're moving towards a mature partnership. But their feedback was that it's definitely a turn in the curve in that journey, but they would like to see more shared ownership from the partnership, from the wider system. So that's going to be a focus of our work moving forward. I hope that gives you some reassurance. I can certainly share links to previous report that's come to scrutiny that would give you a bigger overview really of the work that's happened over the last 12 months.
I would appreciate that. Thank you, Jackie. And I think what I always miss in the responses, which are great, and thank you for taking the time to do that, is in my head, my head's saying, what are the timelines? How long is this going to take? I know this stuff doesn't happen overnight. We all know that. But actually, how long is that night going to be? So I would like some timelines on it. And if we don't achieve that for whatever reason, what contingencies we've got in place, I want to hear about plan A, plan B and plan C. Not for now, but at some point. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Anita. I'm going to bring Mary in. Can I just make a gentle reminder that please, when you're coming back, whether you're responding to a question asked to you or whether you want to come back for your second question, you need to come through the chair. Yes, Mary, you can
Thanks
ask.
a lot. And thank you. And Jackie, thank you very much for the update. That was very useful. One of the things that we all know is really particularly difficult for children with special education needs is transitions. So whether it's a transition from home to nursery, from nursery to school, from school, infant school to junior, and then the transition to secondary and the transition into either college or work or whatever it is. And so I just wanted to know, to find out a bit more about how you're dealing with those transitions in order to support children through them. I have to say I've got a particular interest because 2 of my grandchildren, my son and then 2 of my grandchildren have special education needs, and I did find the transitions for all of them quite difficult. I'm sure that's in your radar and I'm sure things are going on, but I would at some stage like to see a report about how those are being managed across Haringey.
Well, I'm really pleased you raised that, Mary, because we were talking about it today, and there is a whole programme of work on the pathways to adulthood and all the whole issue of transitions. And I think I could give you the headlines now, or we could bring a full report. I agree with you because you and I have discussed it. But I think transitions is a massive issue, as a massive issue for families. And when I spoke to the Chair of the Parent Care Forum, that was the issue that was the top of their list, is transition. And it is whether it's mainly, I have to say, transition to adulthood. The transition from the children's services, recipient of children's services, to becoming recipient of adult services. That is a massive issue. And a lot of work has been going on. Lucia and I are both very keen to push that through with a lot of political support for the work that's already going on. But equally, making a transition from nursery to reception, year 6 to year 7, and then post 16, if 16 to 18, all of it can be very, very, very traumatic for children. And so it is something that I know, Jackie, you could give the detail. I did write some notes down, Jackie, but if you want to give the headlines from what you said today at the SEND Exec, that would be very helpful. But I want to reassure you that politically, this is understood, not only understood to be a major issue, but is being addressed as a major issue.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sina. Jackie, you wanted to add something or not? You've said already.
Only if you would like me to respond to Councillor Brabson's request regarding some headlines on the preparation of adulthood strategy.
Please. Yeah.
So thank you, Councillor Mason. You're absolutely right about transitions. It is a key area of work for us, and I do believe there has been improvements over the last year. So the 2 points of transitions for us are from primary to secondary, and then secondary to post 16 into adult services. And the work for those two phases actually does start a considerable amount of time before, but I do know that from parents' experience, it hasn't gone as smooth as it always should do. So it's an area of improvement for us. Our focus moving forward is predominantly on preparation for adulthood. We are looking at our early years and primary school transition phases, but it's mainly on preparation for adulthood. So there's a whole piece of work that's been done around through the SEND strategy. So one of the 5 priorities was around preparing our young people for adulthood, priority within the strategy, and then the work that's been undertaken has been a series of engagement events with parents and carers, with young people through a range of mechanisms and forums they already attend. There was a huge workshop in January of this year with over 90 attendees to inform the 4 thematic areas. Those areas have now been progressed through a subgroup, a task and finish group that is made up of parents and carers and professionals from the health, education, care and voluntary sector. And that's informed a number of actions. Off the top of my head, I would say about 40 to 50 actions across those 4 thematic areas. And in those areas themselves, the focus is around good health, employment, independent living and housing, friends, relationships and communities. So the stage that we're at now is that we have drafted a strategic action plan. We don't need a separate strategy for preparation for adulthood because we have the SEND strategy, which outlines it as a priority, but the action plan has an overall lead for each of the thematic areas, a number of actions and a timescale, and it's a 2-year plan. It won't be going through to formal consultation as agreed by the SEND executive today, only because it's not a key decision and it's been very widely supported and engaged and contributed to through a range of stakeholders. Parents and carers told us, we don't want you to keep asking us about what we need to do. We want you to get on with the work, and we are getting on with the work. So we'll take this action plan back to Markfield and the Parent Carer Forum for some final views, and it will be launched throughout the summer from September, but the work is already going on in the background. I think there was a view that potentially adults and health scrutiny and children and people scrutiny might want to consider a joint panel early next year to receive a progress update on this work, so it gives us some time to get on with the work.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Jackie, that's definitely a plan. That the suggestion is that we actually jointly with adult and health do a review on the transition from child to adult and how the services are responding to the needs of young adults. So we will be definitely doing that in the future.
Can I say, Chair, that would be greatly welcomed by myself and I imagine from Lucia, so that we can collectively harness some of the scrutiny stuff in order to make sure that what is going on is not just scrutinised, but also that there's a contribution. Look at positive. You know, there's a positive.
Absolutely, like just to look at what's been done and what progress we've made and how are we responding to young people's needs. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Any other questions to Councillor Brabazon, to Zina, before I kind of ask my own question? Sorry, I've got just a very straightforward question. You mentioned about children, the extra kind of speech and language therapy services coming to the area. I mean, I remember previously like working in early years setting, speech and language therapy used to be widely available within the children's center setting. So it's one of the kind of diagnoses that earlier intervention does actually make a huge difference. So if it's more delayed, then it's probably difficult to kind of put the right support and so on. So where are they going to be based, and how would families and the community, people who suspect that their children might have...
I'm going to give you a bit of a general answer. I am going to have to ask services for the detail. But there's 2 lots of money as far as I can work out. One pot is coming, I think you have, has been speech and language, or we put something, but the other is coming, has to go to schools forum. So it hasn't been formally agreed yet, which is there's been an underspend in the early, what's called the earliest block. That is the early years money that comes from the government. And happily, there was some issue and they've allowed us to keep some money. That's really good. And that there's a committee that sits within schools forum of providers and recipients of it. So it's a, I don't know, you could call it a co-production group, I suppose. And they had to discuss how they thought the money should be allocated, what priorities were. So within that, one of the prioritisations is about speech and language, and they would be hiring people to work through the children's centre networks to support children. And there's going to be quite an extensive outreach programme. So all of this has got to be agreed by the schools forum. I haven't seen the written paper yet, but I was at a couple of meetings. That's the direction around that. But I don't know if you want to add more.
So it's a small injection of money to shift the system. So we want, as I was saying earlier, getting that early work done. We want everyone across the system to be taking the same approach. So we're going to get 4 people in to train the trainers and cascade it down so that everybody's thinking speech and language, and we can make interventions earlier when we can, rather than not. It's not going to solve everything, but it's a bit of additional money into the system.
We have to grow our own.
Is it
no therapists out there?
Is it tasked? Am I supposed to go through you to answer?
Yes, I would prefer that, but that's fine. So you can ask your question. And yeah.
So with speech and language, if you target it to a certain child, rather than a group of children, it sort of gets lost, because as soon as you move up into year 1 and you're targeting to a particular child, you've got a group of children, like it's targeted to the child, but the teacher never gets really to take the opportunity to spread it out. Without it being spread out amongst the class, the child doesn't actually benefit from it. And usually speech and language techniques are really, really, really comprehensive. Like you tell a story and you're using visuals and you're using things to touch and things to feel and sensory objects and all the rest of it. So it's completely comprehensive, really, and can be spread out amongst an entire class. But where it's targeted, the child gets that opportunity to have the story told to them individually. And then as soon as they go back into class, it's back to the normal teaching methods, and it all gets sort of lost.
I think everyone would agree with that.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's speech and language is brilliant, and the more that happens at children's centre level, nursery level, the better, because those techniques then move up, and they're comprehensive. They suit everybody. They're a very inclusive thing, really.
Yeah.
So
that's the approach we want to get to, where we shift the system.
Yeah, shift the system. Yeah, because basically the system doesn't accommodate. At the moment, it doesn't really accommodate the child that needs speech and language, although they get speech and language and they sent back into the classroom, and it's supposed to be incorporated. Everyone slips back into their normal ways of teaching. And
so we get everyone doing some basic things that are easy skills to develop across the whole system: midwives, nursery workers, children's centre workers, teachers, parents. Then that should help some children, and then out of that, those that need the specialist resource, then we can tee them up for that. But so there's lots of work going on. We're getting a strategy going there. But it's, we're working with our health colleagues. So this doesn't sit only with the council, it sits with our health colleagues and people across the system.
Right. Mary, I'm going to take Lottie first, because she hasn't had the chance to ask a question. But also it's in relation to this, but then I'll take your
No problem.
Really a question, more of a statement. I think the teaching of parents in that early years circumstance, particularly with autism, is massively important. And I say that as somebody whose daughter wasn't diagnosed until she was 14. Now, the scenes and the tantrums in our house could have been avoided by my turning the radio off, but I didn't know to turn the radio off.
That's right.
So I think all of that sort of thing that can feed in, and the parents can be part of that, as Sue so very wisely says, you know, as if it's inclusive and we learn it all the way through from the baby groups forward, that would help.
That's the ambition. That's Councillor Bradley's ambition that we're trying to enact, but we're not, you know, it's a long way.
Yes.
We're not there yet.
But at least we've
That's
got the vision.
Yes,
Right.
the vision is the most important thing.
I wouldn't want you to think having the vision doesn't mean there's no delivery going on. I have been doing a little tour of our children's centres. I've been involved in this for donkey's years, and I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved. I spoke at a conference, just gave it a little, you know, closing remarks thing last week at the Children's Centre conference. And I did reflect on where we've come in 30 years. Now it's a completely different landscape. And actually, Haringey's come a million miles from where it was. And we should be incredibly proud of the provision that is going on in our earliest years, where you go to our nursery schools, the children's centres, playgroups, private nurseries, the whole infrastructure has really come forward. And the type of inclusive stuff that you're talking about, Sue, I think is actually how it really works now.
Oh,
So
yeah, I
hopefully
think
we
it is.
overlaid specialists, you know, if you're training the trainers, if you're bringing in to train the nursery workers, so the speech and language is part of your everyday work.
Yeah.
Is where you need to be, because we are creatures who communicate, we speak. That is a natural thing for human beings, and that's what we need to do. And the speech and language, every bit of research shows that if children don't develop that in the early years, you're building that problem. So, but we all know that. We're just repeating what we all know.
Exactly.
It's
Thank you for that.
It's sort of more
Sue,
basic
sorry.
to year one.
Yeah, get it.
I was gonna just, gently remind again that please come through the chair, even when you're responding to the question, when you're asking question. I mean, it's just like, it feels like otherwise we're just like talking amongst each other, and that's fine. Mary, I'm gonna bring you in now.
Thank you very much, Matt Pooley. Just going back to, apologies everybody, to the transition issue. The one of the things that we're aware of at the moment is the huge effect COVID has had on children and young people's mental health. And I just wanted to make sure that the transition from post 18 from CAMHS into adult mental health services, that is included in the transition paper. I've got a particular interest in this because my son transitioned really badly from CAMHS, which was very supportive, to adult mental health, which wasn't able to provide him with any services. And so, and I know lots of other parents who've had the same issue, and that issue has become even worse now with COVID and the impact it's had on young people. So just to make sure that that is included in the transition, and that would be great. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that suggestion, Mary. So anything? Yes, anyone? Okay, any other last question to Councillor Brotherson? I mean, we obviously exceeded our time, allocated time. But I just wanted to, if no further questions, I just want to thank you, Zina, for coming and answering and responding to answering the questions from the panel members. And basically, feel free to leave or feel free to stay. So it's totally up to you.
I'll stay with our officers, of course.
Okay, great. So that's your choice. Okay, item 10, Haringey Travel Assistance Policy consultation. So this is Jackie. Jackie is going to basically give us a brief outline of where we are at with the consultation and what are the responses so far. And it's the report is actually attached to the agenda pack. So you should have all had a copy of this brief report. Okay, Jackie, can I bring you in?
Yes, of course. I'm just making sure that it's showing from my screen. Okay, so just to let you know, members, I haven't got the ability to see hands up because I'm showing it as a full screen size. So if someone could just let me know if there's any questions throughout, but happy to take questions at the end.
So yes. Sorry, Jackie, I was going to just say at the end of the presentation, if there are any burning questions in between, people can come through the chair and we will pause your presentation and ask the question. But otherwise, I prefer to keep the question at the end of the presentation.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So this presentation is an interim. So this presentation is an interim update in regards to the consultation on the Haringey Travel Assistance Policy. It's an interim report because the consultation is ongoing until the 31st of July, but it was felt like it'd be useful to bring you an update whilst the consultation is live and to seek any views and answer any questions that you have. So in terms of the travel assistance policy itself, so the current policy is called Home to School Transport Policy. We are proposing to update this policy and develop two new policies, one for pre-16 and one for post-16. And this came as a result of an informal learning review that we conducted in November of last year called the SEND Transport Learning Review. And that was as a result of quite a chaotic start to the school year in terms of travel assistance for young people. The learning review was attended by a range of stakeholders, so we had representation from special schools, parents and carers, transport providers, local authority officers, and other schools themselves from procurement as well. And what we found through the learning review is a number of actions and recommendations that we wanted to take to ensure that we didn't have the level of disruption going forward for future academic years, but it also created an opportunity to identify a number of areas of work, this being one of those. So this came to Cabinet on the 8th of March as a key decision requesting the approval to consult. Those policies were shared, and if you click on the link on the presentation that's been sent to you, that will take you to the Cabinet decision and the draft policies that are there. Consultation started, I think, at the beginning of the 11th of March and it ends on the 31st of July. And there's a number of proposals within these two policies. The first one being that we will always ensure that wherever possible, we promote the most sustainable method of transport for a young person based on their specific needs. So that focuses on sustainability, but also independent travel options. Hence the move from transport policy to travel assistance, because these policies are very much about supporting young people, those young people who can travel independently, and that will help support them with their transition to adulthood. We have created a policy specifically for young people post-16, not because there's different criteria, but there are different options that are available to them. A large number of young people can be supported through general travel assistance and free transport through the London network, but this is specifically for those young people who would require travel assistance going forward. Another area is we have introduced behavioural standards, and that's really about making sure that as a service we understand young people's needs and that we're making sure the service is provided in response to those, but it's also about keeping children, young people and staff safe. So we've introduced a number of standards that we would expect to see taking into account young people's needs and making sure that we're adapting our response based on that. Within the policies, we have now introduced a much more detailed explanation of the transport decision-making process. I think one of the things that I hear from families all the time is communication is the #1 priority. We need to get better at communicating, roles, standards, expectations, criteria. So this is a way of doing that through these policies, being really clear about what happens when you make a request for travel assistance and what the process is afterwards. We have a whole section in the policies. These are things that have either not been featured in the current policy or they're not very clear or transparent, and this is our attempt at making those much more clear for families moving forward. So another area is ensuring that we are very clear about the appeals process. So if people request transport and that's not approved, then what the process is to follow to challenge that decision. Another area is we're proposing to introduce cut-off dates, and that's really to ensure that we inform effective planning. So the cut-off dates are very typical, very similar to what a lot of other London authorities and wider local authorities do. they'd be very well advertised, very well communicated. There would always be the exception. So if we have young people moving into an area and it's gone past the cut-off date, then we would of course still consider that application through the normal process. But having cut-off dates means that we can really plan effectively. One of the reasons why we have such disruption in September is because we often get a lot of last-minute changes in those last couple of weeks. To the detriment of being able to plan effectively. So it's not about those that change address or those that move into the borough or those where it really is an exceptional circumstance. It's about your routine. These will be the cut-off dates in the year, and then they will be well communicated. Personal travel budget. So in terms of providing different routes for transport, we already have a personal travel budget system in place, but we've been doing some benchmarking across Pan London, and we have now increased our rates to match those, which may be a more attractive offer for parents to be able to use a personal transport budget to support their child to access school rather than the use of public transport. We have introduced really comprehensive guidance around our application process. It's very clear about the process to follow, what the criteria is, and again, linking back to if an application is refused, being clear about why it's refused and what other alternatives can be supported. And then we're also taking the opportunity to clarify what transport can be provided for anything that's outside of the school curriculum. I think we've had a history of agreements being made on an informal basis, and we want to ensure that we are consistent across the borough, that everyone is clear on what those processes are. So in terms of consultation, and I personally think this has been a great example of how to undertake formal consultation with a wide group of stakeholders. So within our local offer page, we have it published on our front landing page, but we also have a dedicated page just for the SEND transport consultation. We have a series of Microsoft Teams Lives events. You can see the dates on there. There's a further one that's coming up soon. We had an in-person event at Markfield with parents and carers on Friday just gone. We have been doing talks at all of the special schools, so attending coffee mornings, so a number of schools on there, but we also have been out to Riverside and the other special schools. The vast majority have taken us up on this opportunity, where we've met groups of parents and talked them through the policy, but also provided reassurance about travel assistance from this academic year. We have made sure that it's been promoted.
Jackie, apology for interrupting you. I just wanted to pause, stop you briefly, just to say that actually we all have a copy of this report. So I probably should have said that in the beginning, maybe just summarize what exactly the proposals are, because I'm quite keen to ask questions rather than going through the report, because we've got the report anyway. We all have read it as well.
Of course, lovely. So I've summarised the proposals that I've just gone through, and this just shows you how we've undertaken consultation, as does the next slide. So it's been very comprehensive in terms of the consultation that we've undertaken. So bringing you to the responses today, you can see a summary of the responses. This is slightly different to the version that you've received because I have taken an update as of Friday just gone. And you can see that we've had almost 70 responses. Vast majority are parents and carers of children who have access to SEND transport, and they generally are females between the ages of 25 and 64. And this is a summary of the responses today. So we can see that approximately half of the respondents are clear about the criteria, about the changes within the travel assistance policy, are supportive of a behavioural standards being introduced, and the number one priority for families through the consultation is that we need to be better at communication, and I really hope that this policy goes some way to support that. And then in terms of preparation for the new academic year, because this is the thing that is heavily weighing, I think, on parents, and certainly hearing from a Parent State Assembly executive, this is an area that they're most concerned about. The parent who attended the SEND executive is also part of the Task and Finish group supporting this area of work. And they have said that they believe that a lot of work has been undertaken, they've been engaged in a lot of work, and they think it will be much better this year, but they want to see that happen. So in terms of support, the procurement is pretty much done. So that's for 3 years, which means we will have best value, more sustainable transport, and hopefully at a lower cost than what we've been paying, because it's been an annual contract to date. All of the schools were given the routes last Thursday, so earlier than our deadline, and then schools were reporting today that it was really useful to be able to have those lists, because the first thing they can do is check that all of the children who should be accessing transport are on there. So it means we've got early engagement to identify any issues. We're doing some trial runs over the summer with our transport providers and our travel buddies and travel escorts, just to make sure we test the route, taking into consideration LTNs across the borough. We've had some additional investment in the SEND transport team, so we're having a parent liaison officer join the team, and that's really about making sure there's a point of contact and better communication with families. And then mission software is something we've had for some time. This software is about making sure that we can plan all the routes out effectively and take the most pragmatic and best value routes. But the next stage is to be able to allow parents and carers to be able to track their young people on their journeys and to upload things like medical information. So it means we've got all the information in one place. And that brings me to the last slide, just to say that the consultation does end on the 31st of July and would encourage anyone to view that. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Jackie. I just wanted to see if there are any hands up. Yvonne, are you indicating that you want to speak? Because I'm usually, okay, that's fine, because, okay, Sue wants to come in, yeah.
I want to ask about the personal travel budgets. So are these separate from families' personal budgets? And are they uniform? So are they given to anyone regardless of their needs? So you might have a child who's you know, completely in a wheelchair, etc. And therefore, for that parent to be given a travel budget rather than simply provided with a bus that picks them up, that's an area of work for them that they didn't have before. So how does that work?
So they are separate to direct payments. So these are personal travel budgets, and the way that it's agreed is that when a parent or carer makes an application for travel assistance, they provide a whole range of information about their child, and that's taken into consideration, matched to our eligibility criteria to assess are they eligible. And then the second stage is determining, in consultation with the parent, about what the best mode of transport is. So it will either be providing public transport, so shared minibus or taxis, and generally for young people with complex needs, we wouldn't be offering a personal transport budget or a travel assistant travel buddy. It would be public transport. A second option would be a travel buddy, so where we've got young people who with some support could eventually travel to their place of learning safely and independently. So that's a worker who walks with them, or who gets public transport with them, or who may ride to school with them. And then the third area is personal transport budgets. And that's where we would offer the parents, it's a flat rate, it's based on a calculation. I can't remember the details, apologies, but it's within the policy with a flow chart and the flat rate that's been agreed, which is comparable with London boroughs. But again, they would only be for where we've asked the question, where parents have identified that, one, they would be interested in that, and two, they could, with some financial assistance, get their child to school safely. So it really would be, it's not a decision that we make in isolation, it's a decision we make with parents and carers who apply for assistance in the first place.
Okay, so can I ask?
Yes, Sue.
Sorry, just to clarify, so it's not a flat rate, it's a variable rate depending on the needs of the child.
The personal travel budget is a flat rate. I can send the link round afterwards to the draft policy, because it's on a particular page in terms of the calculations, but the decision about whether we offer a personal transport budget is very much around the needs of the young person. So it's very unlikely that those young people with complex needs would be offered a personal transport budget. It's linked to where parents respond saying, one, I think I could support my child to get to school with some financial assistance, and two, they don't need public transport. So generally that's what would lean us in that direction. But I'll send to Rob the link to the policy and the page number where you can read that detail, and happy to answer any further questions outside of the meeting.
Great, thank you for that, Jackie. I just wanted to ask a really quick question around the consultation itself. So presumably the consultation is directed towards families and carers of those children who need travel assistance in first place. So this is not open to general public to kind of comment, because and if that is the case, like how many families do we have in our database of, you know, using travel assistance currently, or children? And just to be able to see how well are we doing in our consultation, are we able to kind of reach out to as many families as we could, and yeah, to get a balanced response. Yeah.
So we have approximately 630 young people that have travel assistance. It's around about that number. I should have been more prepared, apologies. And in terms of promoting the consultation, it has gone out. We have targeted parents and carers of children and young people with SEND, whether they have transport or not. We've specifically targeted those households that do, but we have also sent information to every single household in the borough through Haringey People and Haringey People Extra. The Send newsletter has over 2,000 subscribers. That's a significant increase in last year. So we, you know, I am confident that we are reaching as many people as we possibly can to receive that feedback.
Yeah. Okay. Just to come back on that, like despite widespread, like I can see that, you know, like you've run number of Teams meeting. It's basically sent through Haringey People. Like lots of different channels were used to communicate with families, with people, but I would say still the response, I mean, obviously it's until end of July, so there might be more people sending in last minute, but so far it's been a little bit low. And I was just thinking, like going forward, what in terms of like what else can we do to increase participation or increase people kind of coming forward to comment, because we really need to shape it by their views and their input. Yeah.
I'm very open to any other ways that you think we can consult. I think what I've shared today has been an exhaustive list that we've worked through, but very happy to look at other ideas. And I should say as well, apologies, that the 69 refers to those who have responded formally to the consultation. So all of the in-person events that we've been doing at the special schools and on Teams, we haven't collated that feedback yet. They've only happened in the last 10 days or so. So that will be added to those as well going forward. If I had to estimate, I would say it's about double that number to date.
Thank you for that. Any question, Jackie or Jackie? No? Who wants to ask? Yes, Sue.
I mean, this is quite a change for some families, isn't it? And so what sort of review of the changes will be made?
So that the policy, we have to review our policies annually. So once the policy is implemented, we'll review on an annual basis moving forward. So we have to do that in law anyway. But the changes have been informed by feedback from parents and carers in the first place about what they would like to see, as well as us tightening up some processes. So I think they are generally well welcomed. If I had an overall comment, I think it would be around making sure that our policies are very clear, because what some of the feedback was is I'm not sure what it is that you're telling me. So I think we just need to do some reviewing of our terminology. But yes, they'll be subject to an annual review.
Right. Thank you for that. So if there's no further question, yeah, we will move to the next item. Thank you very much for that, Jackie, and we look forward to obviously the reviewed policy, updated and reviewed policy. Okay, item 11 is support to refugee children, and I'm going to bring Beverly to briefly introduce the report of updating us. And basically, Beverly, we've already got a copy of that. So just if you can be brief and just summarize what additional things or what else, then we will take some questions. So we have the copy of the report as part of our agenda. Yeah, please start.
Thanks so much. The report serves to just provide a kind of a summary overview and an update on some of the activity and support offered to our refugee families who are seeking refuge in Haringey. Principally, it refers to our families from Afghanistan and the Ukraine. And happy to take any questions at the end of today's session. And if I can't answer those questions, you will get a written note with the explanations to any matters that have been put. So the Afghan resettlement scheme and the Ukraine sponsorship scheme have now by the council been merged into one strategic forum where we look at the needs of all refugee people in Haringey. The Afghan resettlement scheme has been in operation longer than the Ukraine, obviously, and we feel that much of the work that is happening is split between children's social care in our no recourse to public funds service, the Welcome Hub and Connected Communities. Work as a kind of a consolidated group of professionals and respond to the needs of our families by ensuring that they have access to adequate food, shelter, that they are accessing all their health needs are satisfied, that they are continually morally supported through the Welcome Hub. And we are really pleased at the government's stated intentions that they want to extend the offer that's been provided to the Ukraine refugees to groups like families from the Afghan. The work in children's social care indicates that we have supported over this year 15 families from Afghan, and they continue to be done prioritised through our no recourse public funds team. At the Ukraine scheme, there's been much about the plight and the challenges our colleagues have suffered coming to England. Now, England's a long way for our families to come to, and the system that was pushed out from the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities has over time refined itself. It wasn't as polished as we would have liked it to have been when it was first rolled out to local authorities. But we do, I think you might find it helpful if I went through some of the numbers since the scheme operated and the announcements were made in March this year. There are currently 530 people who have come forward for under the Ukraine and made a request to be known to Haringey. We have sponsors have come forward at 265. We have 259 properties that have been that involved. So 265 sponsors across 259 properties. The numbers of children and numbers of families that are being supported at the present time or known to us are 147, and 63 of them have visas. Now, there's been quite a lot of work behind the scenes to ensure that those families are matched to their sponsors. Safeguarding checks have been completed. That has involved health, police, and social care. There are children involved in adult social care. Connected Communities have played a significant part in supporting us with those assessments and meeting the immediate needs. And our work has involved liaison with the for the Department for Work and Pensions so that families are able to access things like child benefit where it's appropriate for them to do so. We have had some areas where we needed further clarification from the Home Office about how they wish us to treat asylum seekers, children who arrive under 18 with no known adult. But that has now been ironed out, and we have a clear system for them to access support. One of the things that I think is an achievement by us, and I'll refer to, and we've made a reference to it in the short report, is the numbers of Ukraine children who have access education. Some of our sponsors have been very proactive and supported the officers in registering our families with GPs and having them registered with schools. I can come back at another time to show you the impact and how they're settling into schools. But given that it's still early days, we haven't really submitted the detail of that in our report. That's the highlights from my brief summary report.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Beverly. Any questions from colleagues? Okay, Council Anna and Mary, and yeah.
Hi, Bev, you mentioned the safeguarding checks that are being carried out in the context of resettlement programs. I'm keen to have more information on how sponsors are being vetted and whether there have been any lessons learned on safeguarding from this process. I know when the resettlement schemes were originally rolled out, there was a lot of criticism around the fact that there wasn't sufficient detail on vetting of sponsors. So I'd like to know if this has been resolved and if we've learned any lessons from the initial rollout of the programme.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Councillor. There was concerns around the level of detail to the safeguarding checks. I don't know if it's. Can you hear me?
I think we need some people to go on mute. Eva.
Mary, can you unmute yourself, please? Yeah. Sorry. Yvonne?
Yes.
Can you mute yourself? Yeah, great. Thank you. Yes, Bev, can we?
A critical part of completing safeguarding checks has been to first complete what we call the suitability of accommodation, and working with our colleagues in housing. Those checks have once a sponsor has been identified and a family have made connections with them, we are notified usually pre the families arriving. The suitability of accommodation checks will be conducted. We immediately start the DBS checks, and through the MASH, we have been successful in securing support from our colleagues in health with consent to ensure that there is nothing of concern that we need to know about the sponsor's health and their own vulnerabilities. We have dedicated 2 qualified social workers who also, with our colleagues from Early Help, do visits to the home and through the safeguarding lens, go and talk to anyone in the household. And so that produces 2 reports, the suitability of accommodation and then a more robust safeguarding check. We have also issued to all of our partners safeguarding guidelines as to the setting out the expectations from Children's Social Care as to what we want them to continue to look for post that piece of work being done. If we feel that there's vulnerabilities but that can be supported, those families and the sponsors will get support, continue to be monitored and support, guidance and signposted for intervention throughout through the placement with the families that arrive from the Ukraine. I hope that answers your question. So all of the statutory checks are completed.
Great. Thank you for that, Bev. Mary, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just quickly, thank you. Thanks a lot, Bev. Really interesting and useful report. Thank you. There's been a couple of issues that have come up in Bounds Green that I was a bit concerned about, to be honest. One of them was a family where the child of the host was autistic, and the family came. Sorry, I can't remember which way it was round, but one of the children was autistic, and it meant that the family weren't able to stay in that host's house. They were then referred back into Homes for Haringey as homeless, and then sent right down to South London in temporary accommodation. And I really couldn't understand why they hadn't been offered another host family, because I know there's people who are offering and have been cleared as host families, but haven't got a family at the moment. So I just wondered whether it was worth checking to see whether they could be whether Homes for Haringey could refer any families back to yourselves to check that there weren't any host families, because clearly it's better that there are host families. And the other thing is that there has been, with quite a number of the host families, some of them have referred the people to the food bank, where we can offer not just food but also other interventions and support. And whether you were able to make sure that all host families knew that the food banks were available and that they offered a social interaction as well as other kinds of support. Thank you.
Really helpful set of questions. On the first matter, I do need to go. I need to look into that. I don't want to give an answer tonight.
Sure.
I am aware that there was a family that needed to move quite quickly, but I need to look into the details, and I will send you a separate note on that one. In relation to the psychosocial needs, I take your point entirely. We really don't want the communities that have done such a long journey to come into Haringey move. We're not a port authority, so it's not an easy feat to arrive here. The psychosocial needs is important, and in our own welcome pack, we have emphasised that, learning from previous experiences of supporting refugees. I'm going to triple check that we don't just see the services that you've just referred to as food supply, but we actually see the value of how you can meet the psychosocial needs and integration of our refugee families. And I'll send you a separate note when I'm satisfied that that's intact and well distributed.
Many thanks, Bev.
Thank you for that, both Mary and Bev. Any other questions? Okay, Bev, I have a question. Basically, like the welcome hubs were coming out in a number of different paragraphs on the report. So I just wanted to know where exactly these welcome hubs are and who are they? Are they part of the local authority, or are they like migrant support organization? So who are we referring by welcome hubs?
Sorry, was the question about the welcome packs?
No, hubs.
Hubs, our welcome hub.
Yeah.
Yes, the welcome hub is part of the strategic group that meets almost every week, and it is the hub is led by people within the council, and the migrant trust is involved in that. I think what it might be helpful for me to do, rather than mislead you tonight, is send you the exact details of who operates that on a daily basis and how our officers support it.
Yeah, that would be really useful. Thank you very much for that. And also I wanted to ask, in regards to unaccompanied minors, do we have, like, has there been a surge on both, like, you know, from Afghanistan as well as Ukraine, from unaccompanied minors to here, or is it all? Because presumably some of the families will be absolutely desperate to just send their children out of the conflict zone. And I'm just thinking if there's been a surge in unaccompanied minors in those two countries.
In terms of whether Haringey has experienced an increase in unaccompanied asylum seekers, not significantly, no. But we have had an unaccompanied asylum seeker from the Ukraine, and in June, the government, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, did issue some guidance and a change of direction as to how they would support local authorities to make sure that those children had the same privileges in terms of how we would treat them and respond to them as unaccompanied asylum seekers, usually under the National Transfer Scheme. So our one unaccompanied asylum seeker, as it materialised, was matched with a family friend, and we are in the process of doing appropriate assessments as a private fostering arrangement, because the evidence from their birth family is that that was their preference.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Mary, I can see your hand up. I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand or you have a further question.
Very sorry, legacy hand. I'll put
Right.
it down there.
For that. Okay, if there's no further question, just want to say thank you very much, Beverly, for that. And that was very useful. Yvonne, you put your camera on. Do you want to ask a question or no? Right. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much, Bev. Yeah. Now we move to item 12, which is the work program. There was some provisional agreement on page 53 and 58. Rob will just briefly update us about the potential work program.
Yeah, there will be a fairly comprehensive work planning process involving the committee and panels. Children will be a major part of all that. Is what we did in 2018, which is we're going to have an online survey which will allow the community to say what they think should be the priorities for each of the scrutiny bodies and make their own suggestions as to any particular areas that the committee or any of its panels should look at in detail. Following that, we're going to have another of our scrutiny cafe events, and that's planned now for, I think it's the 9th of September. We're looking at possible venues. One possibility is a sixth form centre. If that doesn't materialise, we may use the Selby, but we're looking at the various options as to what might work best at the moment. So following that, we should be able to put together, the aim is to put together a work plan for the next 2 years. So it should be fairly comprehensive. It'll be items for individual committee and panel meetings, plus possible areas that any scrutiny bodies may want to look at for in-depth reviews. So it won't just involve members of the community and the council, will try and involve officers and partners as well, so that they can have input into the overall process. As the scrutiny cafe is not till the 9th of September, and our next meeting is on the 6th of September, we need to decide at this stage what might be suitable potential items for a meeting on the 6th of September. There were a few items that were flagged up by the previous panel. I'm aware that in a couple of cases, I think things have moved on since then, but I'll quickly go through them. They're outlined in paragraph 4.12. So I'd suggest possibly picking two, maybe three. And the list we've got so far is kinship care, which we never got to last time. Engagement with young people, which is something that tends to come on a fairly regular basis. Stop and search, youth offending service interventions with young people and their effectiveness, and the preparation for adult strategy. But I think that things have moved on since then. And of course, I think the issue was flagged up earlier on in the meeting about domestic abuse, and maybe that may be something else that another option. So yeah, I suppose the suggestion is what might be the best ones to pick from that lot.
Exactly. I mean, there are a number of options and which one the panel wants to prioritize and which one we think is probably going to be useful to look at it at this stage. I mean, we don't have to make that decision right here, but we just basically have our next meeting is before the scrutiny cafe, so we will need to decide on the agenda. I mean, I will obviously have a separate meeting with both Anne and officers and Rob to discuss, but if there's any areas that members feel like we should be concentrating on that for the next meeting, I'm happy to happy to consider as well. Any questions or comment? Mary, you have your hands up, yeah? And
I'm just very quickly, sorry, yeah. If it's possible at the next meeting, I'd really like to start looking at children, young people and domestic abuse.
Yeah. Great, thank you for that suggestion. Okay, Lottie, you wanted to make a suggestion?
Well, I would like to look at stop and search as well. Is it possible to look at two things in one?
We could have more than one report or more than one area.
It would certainly be very interesting.
Children and, yeah, stop and search.
Stop and search, thank you.
Yes, Sue?
I wanted the youth engagement subject.
Okay, youth engagement. Maybe we can combine all of them. Stop and search, youth engagement, domestic violence. Yeah, great. So there are potentially 3 suggestions, and you also wanted to.
So Jackie's texted me to say that we need to take the youth justice plan. It's a statutory plan about what we need to do for youth justice, and we're expecting a youth justice inspection. So it would be good that we had that plan in September.
Okay, so if obviously that needs to be definitely on the agenda, youth justice. Is it a strategy or update of the progress report?
Jackie, it's the actual plan, isn't it?
Yes, the annual youth justice plan.
Yeah, great.
And Rob, if you can put that into the forward plan so that each year we take it at the same point, would that be helpful, Jackie? Yeah, because it's an annual.
From memory, I remember having that in our previous, earlier meetings as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think that particular issue was something that came up in a previous discussion. It was looking at that particular area about how effective interventions were. But I mean, yeah, if it's covered as part of the overall annual report, all well and good. The other thing I should mention is that around this time of the year, we also tend to get a report on the financial situation relating to children. So that's kind of standard in all the payments we get. Maybe we can have further discussions outside the meeting.
Right. Well,
I'd like to add, and it might be for a deep dive, but that we consider housing and children is something that I think, because it's such an issue and it's at the backdrop of a lot of what we do. And it might be my suggestion would be for a deep dive. And we have suggestions, shows how we'd like to make a suggestion as how to do a deep dive differently from our experience from elsewhere, but we'll leave that to another meeting if that would be helpful.
Yes, I was going to say, if we were to look into housing and children like jointly, it might be good to do a joint project with the house and regeneration security panel as well. Okay, Anita, you've got a question, and also obviously feel free to make recommendation, but we know that there are 2 statutory items that we already need to have it on the agenda, but we're happy to take suggestions. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I missed the first bit, and I don't know if I can suggest anything, but I'm going to go a little bit left field. I would like to suggest that there needs some work to be done about tracking, monitoring, identifying how racial incidents are being recorded, logged in schools.
Right, yeah. We'll definitely make note of that and see if we could fit in. It might not be on the next meeting, but we can look at it in our subsequent meetings. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other suggestion? I think we've got quite a few suggestions. If there is no further, thank you for that. The date item 14, and it's the date of our future meetings, as it's already here. We've got our next meetings on 6th of September. And following that, we've got one in November, one in January, and one in March. So we've got 4 meetings scheduled. Our earliest one is 6th of September. Is that the end of the meeting? Okay, thank you very much to everyone, and Sina, members, Bob, Peace, thank you very much for your
Jackie and
valuable
Bev.
contribution.
Thanks, everybody.
Jackie and obviously Beverly, everyone, thank you for your contribution.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.